Hi there. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Zhiyun Smooth 4 mobile phone gimbal. This guy. I've spent the past day and a half or so putting it through different tests and just trying to see how well it works. There are definitely a few weak areas, but I'm going to start with the pros. First of all, here is the unit. Get a little closer there so you can see. One of the things that I do really like about this is the number of controls that you have, and so I'll go over those really quickly. I'm going to turn my phone off so they're not seeing the top of my head. A couple of things that I do really like about this are the dial on the side. As far as I know, this is the only mobile phone gimbal, at least that I've seen, that has anything quite like this. And what this does is it allows you to control both focus and zoom. And so by default, it defaults to zoom. And if you want to switch it, there's this button right here, has sort of a little, looks like a targeting icon, I guess, crosshairs. And so you can switch between focus and zoom by hitting that button. And then whatever mode you're in, moving this dial will either zoom in or out or set your focus close or to infinity. And so that's a pretty handy feature that, again, I haven't really seen on any other mobile phone gimbals that I've looked at. There are a lot of other different options. I'm not going to go over all of them. There are other videos on YouTube that go into those, but just a couple that I want to highlight. You can switch back and forth between the front-facing and rear-facing camera. You can snap a picture. You can start and stop the recording. And this middle button here in the middle of the dial actually allows you to turn the flash on and off, which is pretty cool. You can make it so that if you're shooting a video, the light on the back of your phone is on, gives you some additional light there in the scene. And so on the back as well, there are two triggers here. The bottom trigger enables full follow mode, and so that will do pan and tilt. So you'll notice that as I move the phone around, I currently have it in pan follow mode, which is this switch on the front. You can switch it between pan follow and lock. So in pan follow, you'll notice as I turn the gimbal, the phone turns as well. If I turn fast, the phone smoothly goes along with it, and you'll notice I'm not holding any of the buttons on the back or anything, so that's just a default mode. I could put it in lock mode, and once it's in lock mode, you'll notice, well, it's supposed to stay. We'll get to that. Another thing you can do when holding this trigger is it's supposed to move the phone up and down. It may be because I have the phone locked that it's doing this. In fact, I'm going to try unlocking it here real quick just to see if that's the case. Drawing the pattern sideways is always fun. Trying to remember. Let's see. Well, this will lead me into another thing that I like about this. It has a lock mode where you can take this and pop it down vertically, and that'll actually allow you to use the phone, and the gimbal is still on. So it just puts it into kind of like a standby mode. And so there's no motor holding it. You can move it around pretty easily at this point. And then if you want to take it out of standby mode, just pop it back out, and there you go. There you are. So in this mode, so we're in, yeah, let's see again. So it lost connection with the gimbal, which is, I'll get to that in a minute. It's easy enough to reestablish. You just go into the home screen and then go to connect device. And so we are back. But again, it's not doing what it's supposed to. So in those cases, you actually have to power off the gimbal, and you'll see the phone kind of turn sideways there, indicating that it's off, and then power back on. And then we'll go back to connect the device. There we go. So this is what lock mode is supposed to do. You'll notice that now that it's in lock mode, I'm turning the gimbal, and the phone is staying essentially where it is, which is pretty nice if you're trying to get, you know, you can angle it in different directions, and the phone stays pretty steady. Definitely a pretty cool feature. And so whether you're in pan follow or lock mode on the front, whatever mode this switches in, you can actually use the triggers on the back to override that. So if I want to go back to a follow mode, I can hit this lower trigger, and you'll notice that the phone is now moving. In addition to the horizontal axis, you can also move it vertically in this mode. So you'll notice as I tilt the gimbal down, the phone actually follows with it. Tilt back up, follows with that. Another cool feature, you can use this to quickly recenter. So let's say we've got the phone kind of down like that, and so you can see how it's angled. If you double tap this bottom trigger, takes it right back to the home position, which is pretty nice. This top trigger enables something called phone go mode. It's pretty cool. Instead of this kind of subtle slow movement that you see, so I've put it back in pan follow mode, and you'll see that it slowly turns as you turn the gimbal. You can do things like, I'm going to put it in lock mode here. So just to show this, the phone go mode, if you have it in lock mode and the phone is staying in a certain position, you can hit this phone go and it'll pop around quickly to orient in whatever direction that you've got the gimbal facing. So like so. And this is pretty cool for fast scene transitions. You can leave the gimbal locked in a certain direction, and then, you know, and it also, you'll notice that in phone go mode, when you turn the gimbal, the phone moves much more quickly. So it's not quite as smooth, but it definitely gives you, this is good for action shots if you're trying to track a fast moving target. Accidentally snapped a picture there. That is one thing. These controls are a little easy to hit by accident. Sometimes you kind of have to get used to holding it in a certain way. This is how I hold mine, so that I've got kind of, you know, trigger fingers ready to go, and then also not hitting buttons inadvertently. So a couple of the things that I like, in addition to just all the different options that you have for the device, there are rumored integrations with Filmic Pro, so that will offer a little bit more utility, which I'll get to in a minute. I've definitely got some cons about the app, which some of you just saw because it lost connection and I had to restart the device, but we'll get to that in a minute. It does have a lot of other cool features, like panorama, vertigo, and more, but that definitely leads into the cons, which I'll get to in just one second. The one positive thing that I do want to point out is it has an object following mode that seems to work pretty well. When you, here, I'll just show you actually. So when you put the device into object follow mode, you tap that button right there, and then you can actually draw a box around the object that you want to track, and it will try to track it. It has face detection, general object detection. It helps if there's a contrast between the object and you know, the background, so don't try and track like you know, like a brown dog on dirt. It's probably not going to work as well, but something like tracking a face against like these, you know, these other objects in the background, it actually works pretty well. So to get into the one other pro that I do want to mention is it comes with this tripod as well. So you have this little fold-out tripod. It is plastic, so I wouldn't really put too much weight on here, but for, you know, the device and a phone, it actually works pretty well, and it's great for setting up shots where you can, you know, put it on your desk and do whatever. It's, you know, it's quick videos for online stuff, so you're not, you know, moving the video around and stuff like that. Personally, that's a huge pet peeve of mine, is when you see people on cell phone shot videos and they're going like this the whole time. It's like, why are you doing that? I can't stand that personally. Anyway, some of the cons, the app that you have to use for it, the ZY Play app, is a huge con. It's rated 2 out of 5 stars on Google Play, and there's a reason that it's got such a low rating. It is not a very quality app. That said, I don't know if you've looked into the Osmo, which is, you know, kind of considered the I don't know if I'd say gold standard, but it's definitely like the market leader, I think, for mobile phone gimbals currently on the market. And so the Osmo, though, is iOS only. And so if you use an Android phone like I do, I've got a Galaxy Note 8, You can't even use an Osmo with that phone. The app just simply doesn't exist. So I guess the fact that they even have an app available is a plus. It would be nice if it worked a little better. Some things that don't work, like panorama, doesn't work. I tried to do a 3x3 panorama, so it's supposed to take a total of 9 shots and then stitch them together. Didn't work. First time I tried it, the app crashed, lost connection to the gimbal, and so I had to restart my phone and restart the gimbal. And then at that point, it actually did take all 9 pictures, but then when it went to stitch them together, it only stitched a 180-degree panorama, and so that's another mode, and it's supposed to do above and beyond that. It's supposed to do 180-degree panorama times 3, right, and then stack them on top of each other. Didn't work. So that's, not ideal. It does sometimes lose connection, as you've seen. It also has a really jumpy zoom, so when you use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, here I'll just, again, it's probably easier to show rather than tell. So the zoom in and out is not the best. It's actually better on the rear-facing camera than it is on the front. Here I'll switch over to the front-facing camera and try and give you an example of how that works. So you can notice just that sort of like the, not great. It's not the worst, but it's not great either. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. A couple of other things I noticed. The video that I shot yesterday outside on the street, it was pixelated and blocky. It looks like there were some compression issues. I have the app set to do 1080p with 30 frames per second, which is another issue with the app. It does not support 4K on Android yet. Hopefully that's something that they'll be updating to fix, because, I have a Note 8. It's capable of shooting 4K video. I do that all the time on the phone, and so it'd be nice to be able to use the built-in app with the gimbal controls to shoot that same quality video, or even 60 frames per second, 1080 would be nice. You basically have two options. You've got 720p and 1080p, 30 frames per second for both. So definitely something to keep in mind. The one thing I will say about that is the gimbal itself and a lot of the controls, like the triggers and the different follow modes and stuff like that, actually will work when you're using the built-in camera app on the phone. And so I have done that a couple of times just to test, to shoot 4K video. You can use the built-in camera app in Android to shoot that 4K while still using a lot of the features of the gimbal, so you get stabilized video and 4K. So that's one kind of workaround. It's not ideal though, because it doesn't support things like object tracking and the panorama modes and stuff like that. Of course, panorama is a picture, I guess, but you know what I mean. The vertigo mode wouldn't be supported in the default Android app, only in the ZY Play app, which is like I said, not the best. The one thing about that though is that pretty much all of the cons that I've mentioned so far are software issues, and so if Zhiyun makes the effort to fix the Android app, those are all problems that can be corrected. They're not really problems with the device itself. The one exception to that is one thing that I really don't like about this, and I'm actually going to put this in standby mode to show this because it's easier that way. You'll notice, if I can get the light to shine on it the right way. So, I don't know if you can see that. My lighting setup in here isn't the best, unfortunately. So, right here on the arm of the gimbal is a micro USB. And so you can actually use this to charge your phone. Which is great, because I will say that the battery on the gimbal is like a 12-hour battery while in use, and that's a lot longer than I'd be able to shoot video on my phone. I think my phone would run out of battery power before that. And so to be able to plug in the phone is a great idea, or a great feature. I question their implementation of it though. My phone is USB-C. The gimbal itself is USB-C. That's a USB-C port. So to charge the gimbal, I plug it into USB-C, which is great. I have a bunch of USB-C cables around the house. That's awesome. I wish that they had done USB-C on here as well, or even just straight up USB-A, like a regular USB port that you could then get a small cable to plug in, you know, USB to Lightning or USB to USB-C or micro USB, whatever your phone may use. They might have had to make the arm a little bigger to do that, just to be able to fit that USB port. But this is a poor implementation, because who has a micro USB to USB-C cable, for instance? I know I don't. And so I had to order one on Amazon there. That's a little better picture there, so you can see that micro USB. So I did have to order one on Amazon. It was about $8. I'll try to include the link to that in case anybody else is interested. I don't know if you can get a similar cable that's like micro USB to Lightning. Micro USB to micro USB. I don't even know. It's a really weird cable to try and find. There's literally nothing else I own, and you know, I own a ton of gadgets. All these fabric canvas trays behind me are all full of like tech gadgets. I'm a big tech nerd, and so if I don't have a cable, that's pretty rare, right? That means that the cable is probably not used very often. And I definitely don't have a cable like that. I thought about trying to use like an adapter. Like I do have some, I have some micro USB to USB adapters for my old phone, kind of like the on-the-go adapters. And I thought about using those, but I'd rather just have a single cable. I'm not a big fan of different dongles and adapters. That's why I don't own an iPhone. And so, you know, I just ordered the cable for $8. I'd rather do that than have a mess of, you know, cable extensions and stuff like that coming out of the gimbal where it could get caught on stuff. The other thing about charging the phone, I'm going to be interested to see once I get that cable. I'm sure you can probably see the phone itself sits pretty flush against this little rubberized grip that holds it in place. And so I'm not sure how I'm going to do that when it comes to charging the phone. I don't know if I'm going to try like maybe tilting the phone out like this, or like maybe pulling it up a little bit. As you can see, the phone just popped out. So that's a little worrying about like how am I actually going to plug the phone in and charge it while it's, you know, while it's on the gimbal and like spinning around and stuff like that. So I don't know. That'll be an interesting one. I did get a 90-degree cable on the USB-C side, and so that might help a little bit. I'll probably end up just pulling the phone up so that it's still, you know, gripped. The problem is that'll offset the balance, which will make the gimbal motors work harder. It might drop the battery life, but the battery life's rated at 12 hours. I haven't really put it through any battery stress tests yet, so I don't know the real world lifetime, but even if it's half that, right? I mean, 6 hours, you know, I'm not going to be shooting 6 hours of video at a time, and if I am, I'm going to have one of these fabric drawers is, or actually it's one of these, so you see some plastic trays back there as well. One of those plastic trays is like full of USB batteries. So if I was somewhere where I was going to be doing, you know, more shooting than that, I would probably have a 3,000 to 5,000 milliamp USB battery with me anyway. So yeah, I mean, so far though, I will say that, you know, hardware-wise, this is a great gimbal. It is plastic. Most of it is plastic. There's a couple of metal pieces up here on the actual gimbal arms, but most of it is plastic. I haven't dropped it yet or anything. I'm pretty careful with my gear usually, but I've seen a couple of YouTube videos where guys have said that they've like dropped this on accident, maybe on purpose. I don't know. Some people are weird. And that, you know, it didn't break and it still works. I would not recommend that. It is plastic. I mean, if it hits the right way, it's entirely possible that something could crack or split. But I will say that for a plastic gimbal, it is very well built. And Zhiyun is well known for their gimbals. They have, you know, several different types of mobile phone gimbals and the crane for mirrorless and DSLR cameras. So, you know, this is not their first ride on the merry-go-round. They know what they're doing. They've made these before. I would say that, you know, for the price, especially if you have an iPhone and you're using an iPhone for shooting video, for the price, this is definitely the best gimbal that you can get. On the Android side, I mean, you know, again, you can't even really get an Osmo for an Android because it's not going to work software-wise. So, you know, I will say that even with its limitations, I still think this is going to be very useful, especially with the dial on the side for the focus. The zoom is a little choppy, but the focus is great, and it actually works really well. And so all in all, I would say that, you know, the gimbal itself, the hardware for the gimbal, the way that it works, how smooth it is when it's doing things like panning and tilting, I would say 5 out of 5 on the gimbal. The app, you know, I'm going to say the app is like, I think 2 out of 5 that it's rated on the Play Store is pretty fair. Maybe even a little generous depending on your use case for what you're trying to do with this gimbal. Personally, I would say it's about a 3 out of 5 because it does mostly work. And I'm not a pro. I mean, I'm an amateur. I'm an IT guy who buys too many gadgets. And so for me, it's not as big of a deal. And so, you know, we'll say 5 stars on the device, 4 stars or 3 stars on the app. And so that's, we'll say 8 out of 10. So 4 out of 5 stars is what I would give this. Definitely for the price. I would say that if you're looking to up your mobile video game, maybe you just like to post, you know, short vlogs and you've got kind of a, you know, shaky setup right now, or you're doing that thing where you're like tilting, you know, side to side while you're making your video. Please don't do that, by the way. But if you are and you're looking to up your game, I think that the Zhiyun Smooth 4 would definitely be a good step towards that end. So I hope you found this helpful, and definitely, you know, leave some comments if you have any questions. I'll try to answer them. I'm definitely far from an expert on this. I would recommend, speaking of expert, by the way, the quick start guide that comes with it is incredibly short. It's like a couple of pages of instructions. It's not exactly in depth. You can go on the Zhiyun Tech website though and download the full user manual so that you get an idea of, you know, all the different features and how to use them, how to do things like upgrade the firmware, which is very easy, by the way. It only took me about 30 seconds or so to upgrade this firmware to the latest version. So yeah, I think that, you know, definitely worth it. I would say 4 out of 5 stars for the gimbal. The few issues that I do have with it are almost all software based, and so therefore in theory could be fixed. Hopefully Zhiyun will, you know, kind of take some of this feedback into account and make it a 5-star product. Thanks. Have a great day.